We did a video on attachment theory. There's 4 different types. Secure, who is secure. Anxious, who gets anxious when there's problems in a relationship. Avoidant, who tends to run away and avoid them. And then anxious avoidant, who is a combination of the two. Mm-hmm. This is according to psychological models of people who have studied sort of relationships and how child interact with their parents, which affects how they interact in their adult relationships with their significant other. You said, which I thought was funny, how did I wind up with the worst one of them? Mm-hmm. Because you're like, I'm anxious and I'm also avoidant. And I thought that was interesting because it got me thinking that when I was making the video, I categorized the characters that I did into a type. I was like, Captain America's secure, this guy's this, Iron Man's avoidant, etc. But I was actually watching the video looking for very particular moments where they displayed those traits. So I watched their movies looking for that. And I thought if I went back and looked for Captain America being anxious or being avoidant at any point in his MCU stint, I'm absolutely sure that I could have found it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Iron Man being secure and, like with everybody. So I think a much more useful way, if you ever watch that video or have used this model, is to think of it more as a spectrum of which you have percentages. And typically when people, just draw the line arbitrarily in the middle, cross that 50 line, people say, oh, well, you're anxious. Because they see it constantly in their relationships. But realistically, we all have some anxious, some avoidant, and some secure. And the question is just, where are your triggers? Like, what specifically has to happen? Is it when your significant other is mean to you or doesn't give you compliments or goes out with their friends or whatever? And then what can you do to, hopefully expand the sphere of security and limit the other two? But I did think it was useful because there's probably people, including myself, who thought because I would categorize myself more as the dominant negative one that I have is avoidant. But if that obscures for me the fact that I also have anxious tendencies, I think that's not to my benefit. So
yeah, no, I think everybody has aspects of them because you're avoidant, but also, and maybe I'm forgetting what there is, but anxious is that when someone tries to leave, you hold on, yeah. Right? Well, I mean, to some degree, if you like someone enough, most people will, when things are rocky and someone's saying, oh, maybe we should just break up, they'll try to maintain the relationship, at least for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And I see avoidance in myself in the sense that sometimes when I get frustrated, I go, fuck it. If I could push a button, I would just have this relationship have never happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't, at the start of any fight, say, well, we should just break up. Like, I'm willing to come to the table and talk about things. And so I think everybody has aspects of those. And I actually don't know, because I haven't studied it enough, to what extreme do you have to display it before a clinical psychologist would label you it? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people at some point in a relationship will hit a threshold where they say, I'm out. And at some point they'll hit a threshold. They go, I care about this person a lot. I want to work on it. And that's probably a mischaracterization a little bit of anxious and avoidant, but there's those aspects, especially if you date someone for a really long time, that will just appear where you're like, your threshold is hitting one of those points, even if you're secure 90% of the time.
Yeah, it makes me think about, I think almost everything is, we're finding out in the world is better described as a spectrum than a binary or a trinary or whatever it is. Like I think of autism, for instance, which is like, oh, you are or you're not. And it's like, well, you're not, you're Asperger's or you're autistic. And it's like, wait a second, you're a little bit socially awkward, you're comfortable socially a little bit, and we just start subdividing into categories. Like these categories are just kind of arbitrary thresholds, which is your point. Now, at some point, somebody's going to look at your relationship, be it a friend or a therapist, and say, you tend to run away from a lot of these. Therefore, it would be good for you to see these avoidant tendencies in you. But yeah, the point that we've been making is that if you think that because you are avoidant, you are not anxious, or you think that because you do not have an Asperger's diagnosis, that you do not have areas in which you are not picking up social cues, that is foolish. You know what I mean? There's not just categories of people. I think just about everything that I can conceive of, perhaps with the exception of like binary code, exists on some kind of a spectrum where there's not clear categorization. So that was that. Anything else you wanted to add?
I'm looking up now. I'm more curious what the actual definitions of the different behaviors are.
And maybe that was my misinterpretation of, it's totally possible that was my misinterpretation of the attachment styles, is that already has been recognized that they occur on a spectrum. But that was not what I found when I was researching it, that they tend to lump them as categories that are separate from one another.
Yeah, it's interesting. Insecure adults may be anxious. They worry that others may not love them completely and be easily frustrated or angered when their attachment goes unmet. Attachment needs go unmet. Others may be avoidant. They may appear not to care too much about close relationships. They may prefer not to be too dependent upon other people. To some degree, some of this is also healthy in the sense that if you're too dependent, you're codependent, right? So there's clearly a line somewhere between avoidant, where you don't get quote unquote too dependent. Then there's healthy, where you're also not super dependent, and then there's codependent, where you're too dependent. And so, who's to say when you prefer not to be too dependent on other people, whether you're avoidant or healthily not codependent?
Sure. And that's a social agreement that a therapist makes, and it looks at your life. The other thing is there's times where security in a relationship is ridiculous. Like if somebody's going out all the time smelling of, let's say it's your boyfriend, he's going out, comes back smelling of women's perfume and tells you that he was, hanging out with the guys in their basement watching sports.
Yeah.
And he does it every Saturday and you're like, I'm secure in my relationship. There's space where one would want to feel anxious, and that would be like the appropriate response because this person is withdrawing from you.
Well, I guess that's the question. Are you the anxious type at that point, or are you just not a sucker?
Yeah.
If that's what's happening to you.
Yes. And I think so much of, I guess, even personal development and psychology is about not just having influenced by Cialdini, it's called like click-whir patterns that you go into. Like, somebody extends their hand, you extend their hand back unthinkingly and shake their hand. It's about avoiding having those click-whir patterns and instead responding to the particular situation that you are in, gathering as much relevant context as possible. And so that you're not trapped in, the traumas of your childhood when somebody goes out and that makes you think that you're definitely being abandoned. But when they smell of perfume and they say that they were in somebody's basement, that something goes off in your head. It's just something that I wanted to add. We might make an update to that video because I think I saw a lot of people love categories, man. Whenever I make any of those videos, what type.
Yeah.
And that's why I make them to a degree, is because people love to know their horoscope, their charisma type, their attachment type. There's some safety in saying this is what I am. It is a clear and defined category, and it encapsulates me. And I think people are so eager to I'm an Enneagram type 3. And it's like, dude, if you look at all 8 Enneagrams, you're going to have characteristics of all of them.
Sure.
There's some utility to it, to knowing I predominantly hang out here, but it also creates blind spots in seeing the problems that I have are going to be described by Enneagram type 3 and not by Enneagram type 8, which is just not the case.
Well, yeah, what my favorite part about a lot of these, because this became so popular, I don't know if people remember this phase, where a lot of businesses would have you fill out a survey before they marketed their services to you, because they were saying that different services fit different types, but really it's just they wanted to be able to better persuade you to buy. But it's all self-reported.
Yeah.
So you could have someone who just has a tremendous ego and terrible self-awareness go in and fill out a self-survey and go, oh my God, I'm the perfect type. I'm the exact type I want to be, and all my stuff is great, and I have no flaws, and this makes total sense because this fits my self-identity completely. Yeah. This is completely right.
Questions will be like, and people generally like hanging out with me. It's like, yes.
Yeah, and if you took the 10 closest people to that person and had them each fill out the survey for that person, you might have a totally different personality type, attachment style, Enneagram. So I've always found that to be particularly interesting, is that this says more about how you perceive yourself than it does about who you are or how you actually are in the world.
And in some cases that's appropriate because the thing that they're measuring is your self-assessment. But in other cases where they're telling you what kind of, are you a good friend personality, and you're filling it out for yourself, it's like you are the worst person to ask this question.
Even I think stuff like the Enneagram. Why would you be an unbiased narrator for who you are in terms of your personality type?
Yeah.
I feel like the people around you actually may have sometimes a clearer view of your interpersonal habits than you do.
Yeah. I've often thought it would be nerve-wracking, not necessarily for the Enneagram or the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs, but to get 360 feedback from people in your life that was just like, you know, what are their biggest flaws? What are their biggest blind spots? And just have that go out anonymized to everyone in your life.
I had a friend that did this.
Yeah.
He said it was super valuable.
Yeah. I think I got it.
Yeah. You know the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's that saying? It's like if you go out and meet one jerk, maybe they were a jerk. If you go out and meet 10 jerks in one day, maybe you're a jerk, and everyone's just being a jerk to you because you're a jerk.
Yeah. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.